Everyone ignored the old homeless man living by the pier until a girl started drowning. When they discovered who he really was, tears wouldn't stop flowing. The aluminum can made a hollow sound as Robert kicked it across the concrete. Dawn had barely broken over Tampa Bay, but he was already scanning the ground for recyclables. His weathered hands, marked with calluses from years of manual labor, reached for another can half buried in the sand. $4.20, he muttered, counting the morning's collection in the plastic bag. Maybe enough for breakfast. The sun climbed higher over the water, casting long shadows across the pier. Robert's gray hair caught the morning light, tangled and unwashed. His faded military jacket, now more patches than original material, hung loose on his frame. A group of tourists walked past, their clean clothes and fresh perfume a stark contrast to his unwashed appearance. A woman in the group wrinkled her nose and pulled her purse closer. "Mommy, why does that man smell funny?" a little boy asked loudly. "Don't look at him, honey. Keep walking." Robert kept his eyes down, focusing on the next can. He'd learned to make himself invisible. It hurt less that way. The morning crowd was starting to fill the pier, carrying fishing poles and coolers full of drinks that would eventually become his day's income. "Hey, you there?" A sharp voice cut through the morning air. The security guard, barely old enough to drink, approached with his hand on his radio. "This area is for paying customers only." Robert straightened up slowly, his joints protesting the movement. "I'm not causing any trouble. Don't care. Move along, or I'm calling the police." The guard's badge gleamed in the sunlight. "Mike," it read. Robert remembered wearing a different kind of badge, one that meant something. Now he just nodded and shuffled away, his plastic bag crinkling with each step. He made his way to his usual spot under the bridge, where cardboard boxes and a worn tarp created what he called home. The water lapped at the concrete pylons, a sound that reminded him of better days. "At least the view's free," he said to nobody in particular, settling onto his makeshift seat, a milk crate padded with newspaper. A couple walked by on the pier above, their conversation drifting down. "Did you hear about that kid who drowned last week?" "Yeah, terrible thing. They say the current's getting worse with the season changing." Robert's hand instinctively moved in a familiar swimming motion. 20 years in the Navy, and half of those training young sailors in water rescue. Now he couldn't even get close to the pier without being shooed away like a stray dog. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. Robert watched as families arrived for their weekend outings, coolers and beach umbrellas in tow. Children's laughter echoed across the water, mixing with the calls of seagulls. "Sir?" A hesitant voice caught his attention. A food vendor he recognized from the pier stood at the edge of his shelter. "Got some hot dogs that'll go bad soon. Thought you might want them." Robert's stomach growled, but pride made him hesitate. The vendor placed a foil-wrapped package on a clean piece of cardboard and backed away with a sad smile. "Thanks." Robert managed, his voice rough from disuse. As the day wore on, the weather began to shift. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and the wind picked up, carrying the tang of approaching rain. The pier's warning flags changed from yellow to red, and the loudspeaker crackled with announcements about swimming conditions. Robert watched a weather report through the window of a bait shop. The reporter gestured at radar images, showing storm systems approaching Florida, marking the beginning of what could be an active hurricane season. Residents are advised to prepare. He looked at his tarp, then at the threatening sky. Another season of trying to keep dry, of watching his few possessions float away in the flood waters. His cardboard sign, "Veteran, anything helps," was already curling at the edges from humidity. Night fell slowly over Tampa Bay. The tourists thinned out, replaced by the evening fishermen who at least didn't stare at him with disgust. Robert sat on his milk crate, watching boats return to harbor as their running lights blinked like distant stars. A police cruiser rolled by slowly, its spotlight sweeping the underside of the bridge. Robert stayed perfectly still until it passed. Officer Martinez, he'd learned the name, was one of the kinder ones. She sometimes warned him about incoming sweeps, so he could move his things temporarily. The night wind carried snippets of music from the restaurants along the pier. Robert pulled his jacket tighter and tried to remember the last time he'd sat at a real table, eaten a meal that wasn't given out of pity or scrounge from the day's leftovers. He pulled out the small notebook he kept in his pocket, one of his few possessions from before. The pages were filled with neat tallies, days sober, money saved, places that might hire a man his age. The numbers were discouraging, but the act of recording them gave him purpose. Tomorrow, he whispered to himself, a ritual as regular as his morning king collection. Tomorrow something will change. The waves crashed against the pylons with increasing force as the wind picked up. Robert secured his tarp better, weighing down the corners with broken concrete blocks. His military training showed in the precise knots and careful arrangement of his few possessions. A distant rumble of thunder made him look up. The storm was coming sooner than expected. He needed to move his cardboard before it got soaked. As he worked, his hands remembered other storms, other ships, other lives he'd saved when he wore a different uniform. The last ferry of the day sounded its horn, startling him from his memories. Robert watched it dock, observed the passengers disembarking, their lives so different from his current reality. Some hurried to waiting cars, others strolled toward the nearby restaurants, all of them with somewhere to go, somewhere to belong. He settled into his sleeping bag, positioned so he could watch both approaches to his spot. Experience had taught him to sleep lightly, to be ready to move at a moment's notice. The weather report had mentioned hurricane season, and he knew he'd need to find somewhere more secure soon. One day at a time, he muttered another phrase from his military days that still gave him comfort. The waves kept crashing, their rhythm almost soothing now. Tomorrow would bring more cans to collect, more stairs to avoid, more memories to push away. But tonight, under his patch of bridge, Robert allowed himself to remember when he was someone else, someone who saved lives instead of scrounging for survival. The last thing he saw before closing his eyes was a yacht pulling into the marina, its wealthy occupants laughing and drinking on the deck. Once, he'd owned a small boat himself. Now his whole world fit in a garbage bag, and his bed was cardboard on concrete. Thunder rolled closer as Robert drifted off to sleep. His body instinctively curled against the cold that always came with the storms. Tomorrow was another day, another chance, another battle against invisibility. But for now, the man under the bridge slept, dreaming of waters he used to command and lives he used to save. The water was cold at 5 a.m., but Robert didn't mind. He slipped into the hidden cove behind the pier, his movements silent from years of practice. This was his private morning ritual, away from the judgmental eyes of early joggers and fishermen. His strokes were still strong, cutting through the water with military precision. 20 years of naval service had ingrained proper form into his muscle memory. Even homelessness couldn't take that away from him. "Keep your elbows high, Martinez." The memory of his own voice echoed in his head, instructions he'd given countless times to young sailors. "That's how you fight the current." A boat horn blasted in the distance, reminding him he wasn't in the training pool anymore. Robert treaded water, scanning the awakening pier. Soon the security guards would start their morning rounds. He swam back to shore, his old t-shirt and pants clinging to his body. The morning air bit at his wet skin, but he didn't hurry to his hidden stash of dry clothes. Physical discomfort was an old friend now. "Well, look who's here early today." Robert turned to see Maria, the tamale vendor, setting up her cart. She was one of the few who treated him like a human being. "Morning, Maria." He grabbed the towel from his plastic bag, trying to dry off before too many people noticed him. "You swim like a fish, Mr. Robert." "My Jose, he can barely float." She pulled out a fresh tamale. "Breakfast?" Robert's stomach growled, but he shook his head. "I can't today, Maria. Already owe you for last week." "Bah!" She thrust the tamale at him. "You think I don't see you watching over this pier? 3 times last month you warned drunk kids away from the dangerous spots. Take it." He accepted the food with calloused hands, careful not to let his fingers shake. The corn husk was warm against his palm. "You were someone important before?" "Yes?" Maria asked, wiping down her cart. "Military?" Robert took a bite of tamale, buying time before answering. "Navy. Rescue swimmer trainer." "Ah, I knew it. The way you watch the water." She gestured toward the bay. "Like a guard dog, but for swimmers." The morning crowd started trickling in. Robert stepped back into the shadows, not wanting to hurt Maria's business with his presence. As he moved, his wallet fell from his wet pants. The battered leather hit the concrete, photos spilling out. One caught the morning light, a teenage girl with his eyes, smiling at the camera. 8 years old, that picture. He hadn't seen Amanda since. Your daughter? Maria asked softly. Robert quickly gathered the photos, but handled that one gently. Yeah, she's in college now. I think. He tucked the wallet away, along with the memories it carried. Two fishermen walked past, deep in conversation. Third drowning this month, one was saying. Currents are getting nasty with the weather changing. Where's the lifeguard station these days? Other end of the pier. Takes them forever to get here, if something happens. Robert watched them set up their gear, his hands automatically moving in rescue motion sequences. How many times had he drilled those movements into young recruits? Time is life in the water, he used to say. Seconds count. The morning progressed, bringing more families to the pier. Robert kept to the edges, watching children run too close to the railings, parents distracted by their phones. His fingers twitched every time a kid leaned too far over. Sir? A police officer approached, hand resting casually on her belt. Robert recognized Officer Martinez. No relation to Maria. Everything okay today? Yes, ma'am. He stood straighter, old habits dying hard. Just getting some air? She nodded, studying him. Weather's turning bad later. You might want to find shelter inland. Appreciate the warning. The officer hesitated. The shelter on 4th Street has open beds. Could make some calls. I'm good, ma'am. Thank you. She walked away, and Robert caught his reflection in a shop window. Gray hair wild from swimming, clothes worn but clean. He still tried to maintain standards, even if nobody noticed. The sky darkened as noon approached. Storm clouds gathered over the bay, and the wind carried the first hints of rain. The water turned choppy, white caps appearing on larger waves. A family settled near his usual watching spot. Mother, father, 2 kids. The younger one, a girl around 11, caught his eye. Something about her reminded him of Amanda at that age. Daddy, can we go swimming? The girl asked, bouncing on her toes. Not today, baby. Water's too rough. Robert watched them set up their picnic, remembering similar days with his own family. Before the divorce. Before the drinking. Before everything fell apart. The pier's warning system crackled to life. Attention visitors. Yellow flag conditions now in effect. Please exercise caution near the water. More people arrived despite the warning. Weekend plans outweighing safety concerns. Robert observed a group of teenagers taking selfies dangerously close to the edge, but kept quiet. Nobody wanted warnings from a homeless man. A fresh gust of wind sent spray over the pier. The clouds hung lower now, heavy with approaching rain. Robert gathered his few possessions, preparing to move to higher ground. Hey, old-timer, a young security guard, not Mike today, approached. Can't sleep here tonight. Storm's coming. I know the drill, son. The guard shifted uncomfortably. Look, I don't make the rules. Neither do I. Robert shouldered his bag. Neither do I. He walked toward his backup spot, an abandoned maintenance shed that leaked, but would keep the worst of the storm off him. The wind was picking up, carrying the first fat droplets of rain. Thunder rolled across the bay. The picnicking family hurriedly packed their things, the father half carrying their youngest away from the darkening water. Robert paused to watch them leave, the girl's yellow raincoat bright against the gray sky. Be careful out there, he whispered, more habit than hope. Then he turned toward his shelter, another night of waiting ahead, while behind him the storm gathered strength over Tampa Bay. The weekend crowd packed the pier shoulder to shoulder. Robert had never seen it this busy, even during peak tourist season. A local food festival had drawn hundreds of people, their voices mixing with music from portable speakers and the constant crash of waves below. Watch your step, Robert called out as a young boy nearly tripped over his feet. The child's mother pulled him away without a word, shooting Robert a suspicious glance. He stayed at the edges of the crowd, keeping one eye on the water. The morning storm had passed, but it left the bay agitated, waves slapping against the pier's supports with unusual force. 2 teenagers climbed over the safety railing to take photos. Robert stepped forward, then stopped. Last time he'd tried to warn someone, security had been called. Hey, get back over here. A lifeguard finally spotted them. Rails are there for a reason. Robert watched the kids scramble back, laughing. The lifeguard, young and tanned, shook his head as he walked past. Gonna be a rough day, the lifeguard muttered, more to himself than Robert. Water's worse than it looks. The festival continued to draw more people. Food vendors lined both sides of the pier, leaving only a narrow path in the middle. The smell of fried fish and grilled meat filled the air. Maria waved from her tamale cart. Business is good today, Mr. Robert. But these people, they don't respect the water. No, they don't. He moved closer to her cart, away from the main crowd. Guard said conditions are bad. Look there, Maria pointed toward the lifeguard station. Only 2 guards for all these people. And the other station is closed for repairs. Robert scanned the crowd again. Families with young children, elderly couples, teenagers showing off. None of them seemed to notice the warning flags snapping in the wind. A new group caught his attention. A family was making their way through the crowd. Father in a business suit, despite the heat, mother filming everything with her phone, and a girl around 11 in a bright yellow raincoat. Angela, stay close, the mother called out. It's too crowded to wander off. The girl, Angela, skipped ahead anyway, weaving through the crowd. Her braids bounced with each step, yellow coat bright against the gray sky. Robert watched her approach the railing. She was still within her parents' sight, but they were distracted by a street performer. The waves below seemed to fascinate her. A vendor nearby dropped a tray, the crash making several people jump. In the momentary confusion, Angela leaned further over the railing to see better. Miss, Robert took a step forward. That's not safe. She didn't hear him over the crowd noise. The wind was picking up again, strong enough to make the festival banners snap like whips. The lifeguard's radio crackled. Attention guards, small craft advisory in effect. Rip currents reported north of the pier. Robert counted the steps between himself and Angela. 15, maybe 20. Her parents were still occupied with the performer, unaware of how their daughter leaned out over the dangerous water. More people crowded the railing, phones out to capture the churning waves. Angela shuffled sideways to get a better view, her small hands gripping the wet metal. Get back from there? Robert raised his voice, drawing annoyed looks from nearby tourists. The railing's not stable. A few people moved back, but Angela remained, fascinated by something in the water below. Her yellow coat caught the wind like a sail. There's dolphins, someone shouted. The crowd surged forward, everyone trying to see. Robert was already moving before he heard the scream. The metal railing, weakened by the morning storm and too many people leaning on it, gave way with a sharp crack. Time slowed. Robert saw Angela's eyes go wide as she lost her balance. Her yellow coat billowed up like wings. Her mouth opened in surprise more than fear. She didn't yet understand what was happening. My baby! Her mother's scream cut through the festival noise like a knife. The crowd erupted in chaos. People pushed backward, away from the broken railing. Phones came up, recording. Someone yelled for help. Angela hit the water 15 feet below. The impact knocked her raincoat open. The current grabbed her immediately, pulling her away from the pier's shadow into open water. Help her! Angela's father ran toward the lifeguard station, but it was too far. The guard was already running, but Robert did the math in his head. Too far. Too slow. Too late. The girl surfaced once, gasping. The current dragged her under again. Her yellow coat disappeared beneath the gray waves. Robert stripped off his jacket. 20 years of training screamed in his muscles. The water was cold, the current strong. His body, weakened by months of poor nutrition and hard living, might not be up to it. Angela surfaced again, farther out. A wave pushed her under before she could scream. More people were filming now. The lifeguard was still running. Angela's parents screamed her name. Nobody moved to help. Robert climbed onto the broken railing. The metal was slick under his feet. Below, the waves crashed against the pier's supports, creating dangerous eddies. Sir, don't! Someone grabbed at his shirt. Wait for the guard. He shook them off. Angela had gone under again. Each second reduced her chances. Robert took a deep breath. The old mantra came back automatically. Assess conditions, plot approach, commit fully. No hesitation once you commit. He dove. The cold hit him like a hammer, driving the air from his lungs. Salt water stung his eyes. The current grabbed him immediately, trying to slam him into the pier's supports. Somewhere above, people were shouting. Somewhere below, a little girl was running out of time. Robert fought the current, experience overriding exhaustion. His muscles burned as he stroked toward Angela's last position. The water was murky with stirred-up sand. Visibility extended barely an arm's length. Robert dove deeper, knowing the current would be dragging her down and out. His lungs screamed for air. The cold numbed his hands. Every rescue technique he'd ever taught flashed through his mind. Then he saw it, a flash of yellow in the gloom. The yellow raincoat swirled in the murky water like a dying firefly. Robert kicked harder, fighting against the current that threatened to sweep them both out to sea. His lungs burned. The cold water seeped into his bones. Angela wasn't moving. He reached for her, fingers brushing against the slick material of her coat. The current yanked her away. Robert's vision started to darken at the edges. Need air. Need to surface. Need to save her. Above them, muffled voices carried through the water. Camera flashes penetrated the gloom. The crowd had grown, their faces peering down from the pier like pale moons. Robert kicked again, stronger this time. 20 years of training took over. His hand closed around Angela's arm. Got her. They broke the surface together. Angela coughed violently, spitting up water. Her eyes were wide with terror. I've got you, Robert gasped. I've got you. Stay calm. A wave crashed over them. Salt water filled Robert's mouth. He tightened his grip on Angela, keeping her head above water as they were pushed toward one of the pier's supports. Help! Angela choked out between coughs. Please! Hold on to me. Robert's voice was firm despite his exhaustion. Don't fight. Let me do the work. The current swirled around the concrete support, creating a dangerous eddy. Robert kicked hard, angling them away from the obstacle. His muscles screamed in protest. Above them, Angela's parents' voices cut through the noise of the crowd. Angela, baby, hold on. The lifeguard's coming. Robert glanced toward the pier. The lifeguard was still too far away, running with a rescue buoy. Time was running out. The current was getting stronger. Sir, Angela's teeth chattered. I'm scared. Name's Robert. He adjusted his grip, using the rescue hold he'd taught hundreds of times. What's your favorite subject in school? What? School. Favorite subject. Talk to me. Keep her conscious. Keep her focused. Keep her alive. Math, she managed between shivers. I like numbers. Another wave hit them. Robert took the brunt of it, turning his body to shield Angela. The cold was becoming dangerous. They needed to move. The lifeguard has a flotation device, Robert said, calculating distances in his head. But we can't wait. We're going to swim to that ladder. See it? Angela nodded against his shoulder. Good girl. Now, when I say kick, you kick. But don't fight me. Work with me. The crowd on the pier had grown larger. Dozens of phones recorded their struggle. Robert ignored them, focusing on the ladder 30 yards away. The distance seemed impossible in these conditions. Ready? He felt Angela nod again. Kick. They moved through the water slowly, fighting the current every inch. Robert's legs felt like lead. His arms trembled from the effort of keeping them both afloat. You're doing great, he encouraged. Keep kicking. Tell me about math class. We're learning fractions, Angela said between breaths. Teacher says I'm good at it. Bet you are. Keep talking. Keep kicking. Halfway to the ladder, Robert's right leg cramped. The pain shot through his calf like lightning. He grunted, refusing to let it show in his voice. Almost there, he lied. You're so brave. The current suddenly shifted, pushing them sideways. Robert fought to maintain their direction. The cold was becoming unbearable. His vision blurred. Robert? Angela's voice was small. Are we going to make it? Yes. No hesitation. No room for doubt. We're going to make it. The lifeguard had reached the ladder area with the rescue buoy. He was shouting something, but the wind carried his words away. See that man with the orange float? Robert's words came in gasps now. We're going to swim to him. But first, I need you to promise me something. What? When we get close, you grab that float. No matter what happens to me, you hold on to it. Promise. But promise me, Angela. I promise. Robert gathered his remaining strength. The distance to the lifeguard seemed to stretch endlessly. His muscles were failing. The cold had seeped into his chest, making each breath painful. Now kick hard. They pushed through the water together. Angela's kicks were weaker now, but she didn't stop. The lifeguard extended the buoy toward them. 10 yards. Robert's vision darkened again. His right leg was useless. 5 yards. The cold reached his heart. Each beat felt like it might be the last. 3 yards. Angela's shivers had almost stopped, a bad sign. 1 yard. The buoy was right there. Grab it. Robert used his last strength to push Angela toward the flotation device. Now! Her small hands wrapped around the orange float. The lifeguard immediately started pulling her in. Robert's muscles finally gave out. The current caught him, dragging him away from the pier. He saw Angela being lifted to safety. Mission accomplished. The cold didn't feel so bad now. The water almost felt warm. His body started to sink. Something grabbed his shirt collar. A strong arm wrapped around his chest. I got you, sir. The lifeguard's voice seemed to come from very far away. Stay with me? Robert tried to respond, but his mouth wouldn't work. The world started to fade around the edges. More hands reached down from the pier. People were shouting. Someone was crying. Get him up. Careful. He's not breathing well. Make room. Give him space. Roughwood pressed against his back. The pier. They pulled him up. Angela's face appeared above him, water dripping from her braids. Robert? Please wake up. He wanted to tell her he was fine, but the darkness was pulling him under faster than any current. The last thing he heard was a siren in the distance. Then nothing. The steady beep of a heart monitor pulled him back. White ceiling. Chemical smell. Hospital. Welcome back. A nurse adjusted something on his fore. You gave everyone quite a scare. Robert tried to speak. His throat felt like sandpaper. The girl? The words came out as a croak. She's fine. Thanks to you. The nurse smiled. She and her parents have been here all day. Would you like to see them? Robert managed a nod. The door opened. Angela ran in, still wearing a hospital gown, her parents right behind her. Her father's suit was wrinkled, her mother's eyes red from crying. Robert! Angela's smile could have lit up the whole hospital. You saved me. Just did what needed doing. His voice was stronger now. Angela's father stepped forward, his hand extended. Sir, I don't know how to thank you. Robert looked at the offered hand. The first time in months someone had wanted to touch him voluntarily. He took it, feeling the warm strength of the grip. My daughter's life, the man's voice broke. You risked everything. Anyone would have, but they didn't, Angela's mother said softly. Only you. Outside the window, the storm had passed. Sunlight streamed through the glass, warming Robert's face. For the first time in years, he felt something like pride. The hospital room felt too warm after the cold of the bay. Robert tried to sit up, but his muscles refused to cooperate. Every breath hurt. Please lie still, the nurse insisted, adjusting his oxygen tube. Your body's been through a lot. Angela sat in the chair next to his bed, her yellow raincoat replaced by dry clothes. She hadn't stopped watching him since entering the room. Does it hurt? She asked, pointing to the bandage on his forehead where he'd hit the pier support. Not much. Robert managed to smile. How about you? Feeling okay? Doctor says I'm fine. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. But Mom's making me stay overnight for observation. A doctor entered, clipboard in hand. Mr. Thompson? I'm Dr. Chun. How are you feeling? Been better. Robert tried to shift position again. His right leg still wouldn't move properly. The leg cramping should pass, Dr. Chun said, noting his attempt to move. You're suffering from mild hypothermia and exhaustion. The impact with the pier support caused a minor concussion. But considering what you did, he shook his head in amazement. Angela's father stepped forward. When can he be released? We'd like to keep him at least 48 hours for observation. The doctor checked Robert's vitals. Are you his family? An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Robert looked away, suddenly conscious of his situation. Once they released him, he'd be back under the bridge. We're... Angela's father hesitated. We're going to take care of him. Robert's head snapped up. Sir, you don't have to. James, Angela's father interrupted. My name is James Williams. This is my wife, Sarah. And you already know Angela. He pulled up a chair. And we have a lot to talk about. The doctor nodded and left the room. The nurse followed, closing the door behind her. Mr. Thompson, Sarah began. Robert, please. Robert. She wiped her eyes. The police told us. They said you've been living under the pier? He stared at his hands, rough and scraped from the rescue. The hospital bed felt too soft, too clean for someone like him. Yes, ma'am. But you were in the Navy? James asked. A rescue swimmer? 20 years. Train others too. Robert's voice grew stronger talking about his past service. Retired as a chief petty officer. Angela's eyes widened. You were a real hero before? Just at my job? James leaned forward. What happened? Robert closed his eyes. The memories he'd tried to drown came flooding back. Market crash took my savings. Divorce ate the rest. Started drinking. He opened his eyes, looking directly at James. Got sober 8 months ago, but by then, well, you can see. 8 months sober? Sarah asked softly. Robert nodded. Had to choose between alcohol and food. Food won. Angela suddenly stood up. You can't go back under the bridge. Dad, he can't. Angela, Sarah started. No. The girl's voice was firm. He saved my life. We have to help him. James held up his hand. Actually, that's what I wanted to discuss. He pulled out a business card. I own Williams Marine Services. We do boat repairs, maintenance, some rescue operations. Robert took the card, noting the Tampa address. We've been looking for someone with water rescue experience, James continued. Someone who can train our newer employees in safety procedures. The hope that flared in Robert's chest hurt worse than his injuries. Sir, I appreciate the thought, but this isn't charity. James cut him off. I've already called some contacts of the Coast Guard. They vouched for your record. You're qualified, and we need someone with your skills. Sarah touched her husband's arm. We also own some apartments near the marina. Employee housing. Robert's hands shook as he held the business card. I can't. I don't even have proper clothes for an interview. Dad! Angela tugged her father's sleeve. Show him. James smiled and reached for a duffel bag Robert hadn't noticed before. The nurses gave us your sizes. Hope you don't mind. The bag contained new clothes, work pants, shirts, socks, everything he'd need. Robert touched the fabric gently, as if it might disappear. Why? His voice cracked. You don't even know me. You jumped into dangerous waters to save our daughter, Sarah said. Without hesitation, without thinking about yourself. I think that tells us everything we need to know about who you are. A knock at the door interrupted them. The nurse returned with medication. Time for your next round, she said, adjusting his four. And visiting hours are almost over. Angela stood up. We'll come back tomorrow. Promise you'll still be here? Robert looked at the business card, the duffel bag, the faces of these strangers who were offering him a second chance. I promise. After they left, Robert lay in the darkness of his hospital room. His body ached, but for the first time in months, his mind was at peace. The night nurse checked on him periodically. During one visit, she caught him crying quietly. Are you in pain? She asked, reaching for the medication chart. No, he smiled through the tears. For the first time in a long time, I'm not in pain at all. Morning came with the sounds of hospital routine. Robert woke to find Angela already in the room, doing homework in the chair beside his bed. Mom and Dad are talking to the doctor, she explained without looking up from her math book. Did you know fractions are just division problems in disguise? Is that so? She nodded seriously. Just like you're a hero in disguise. Except not anymore because now everyone knows. Robert started to protest, but Angela continued. The video's gone viral. That's what Mom says. Millions of people have watched you save me. Video? Everyone was filming. She pulled out her phone. Want to see? Before he could answer, James and Sarah returned with Dr. Chin. Good news, the doctor announced. Your latest tests look good. If you continue improving, we might release you tomorrow instead of the next day. That's perfect, James said. Gives us time to get your apartment ready. Robert shifted uncomfortably. About that, are you sure about this offer? It's a lot of responsibility to take on a stranger. You're not a stranger anymore, Sarah replied. And James wasn't kidding about needing someone with your experience. His insurance company has been after him to improve safety training. Besides, James added, Angela's already told everyone at school that a real Navy hero is coming to work for her dad. Dad! Angela blushed. That was supposed to be a secret. The room filled with laughter. Real, genuine laughter. Robert couldn't remember the last time he'd heard that sound, let alone been part of causing it. A physical therapist arrived to help him try walking. His leg was still stiff, but the cramping had subsided. Take it slow, the therapist advised. Small steps. Robert gripped the walker, aware of Angela watching intently. Each step was a challenge, but he'd faced worse. Just like swimming, he muttered. One stroke at a time. By the end of the session, he could make it to the bathroom and back unassisted. The therapist seemed pleased. Remarkable recovery, she noted on his chart. But don't push too hard. Your body needs time to heal. The rest of the day passed in a blur of medical checks, visits from the Williams family, and plans for the future. James brought paperwork for the job, real paperwork with benefits and insurance. As evening approached, Sarah arrived with fresh clothes and toiletries. I hope these fit, she said, laying out the items. We can get more once you're settled. Robert touched the new toothbrush, the deodorant, the clean socks. Such simple things, but they represented so much more. Thank you, he managed. For everything? Sarah squeezed his hand. Thank you for my daughter's life. Everything else is just details. That night, as the hospital settled into its quiet routine, Robert lay awake thinking about the incredible turn his life had taken. One moment of action, one decision to help, had changed everything. He thought about the apartment waiting for him, the job that would use his skills, the chance to be part of something again. Most of all, he thought about Angela's words, a hero in disguise. Maybe she was right. Maybe sometimes it takes losing everything to remember who you really are. Outside his window, the lights of Tampa Bay twinkled like stars on the water. Somewhere out there, his old spot under the bridge lay empty. But for the first time in years, Robert Thompson wasn't thinking about where he'd sleep tomorrow. He was thinking about where he was going. The morning of Robert's discharge dawned bright and clear. He stood at the hospital room window, dressed in his new clothes, watching boats move across Tampa Bay. Ready to go? Dr. Chin asked, entering with discharge papers. Almost doesn't feel real. Robert straightened his collar. The clean cotton shirt felt strange against his skin after months of worn-out clothes. Well, these are very real. The doctor handed him several prescriptions. Anti-inflammatory for your leg, antibiotics to prevent infection from the bay water, and something for pain if you need it. A knock at the door interrupted them. James Williams entered, followed by Angela pushing a wheelchair. Hospital rules, she announced cheerfully. Everyone has to leave in a wheelchair. Even heroes. Robert started to protest the hero label again, but stopped when he saw Angela's expression. Let her have this, he thought. The car's out front, James said. Sarah's getting your apartment ready. The wheelchair felt like a chariot of dignity compared to his recent life. Angela insisted on pushing, though a nurse hovered nearby. As they moved through the hospital corridors, people stopped to stare. That's him, he heard someone whisper. The homeless man who saved that girl. Navy vet, another voice corrected. Did you see the video? Robert kept his eyes forward. The automatic doors opened, and for the first time in 3 days, he felt the sun on his face as a free man. Free from the hospital, free from the streets, free from the weight of failing. James's car was a practical sedan, cleaned and comfortable. Robert sank into the passenger seat while Angela bounced into the back. First stop, pharmacy, James announced. Then home. Home. The word hit Robert like a physical force. The pharmacy trip was quick, James insisting on paying despite Robert's protests. Then they drove toward the marina, taking the coastal road. They passed Robert's old spot under the bridge. The cardboard and tarp were gone, probably cleaned up by city workers. He felt no regret seeing the empty space. That's where you lived? Angela asked quietly from the back seat. That's where I survived, Robert corrected. Living starts today. The marina came into view, boats bobbing gently in their slips. James pulled into a parking spot near a group of apartments overlooking the water. "Welcome to Marina View Apartments," James said. "Home to several of our employees. You're in 3B. Sarah waited at the top of the stairs, keys in hand. The apartment door opened to reveal a small but clean one-bedroom unit. Basic furniture filled the spaces: bed, table, chairs, a used but serviceable couch. "It's not much," Sarah began. "It's everything," Robert interrupted. His voice caught. "It's more than everything." Angela ran to the window. "Look, you can see the boats from here." Robert joined her. The view stretched across the marina to the bay beyond. A Coast Guard cutter moved past, its wake rocking the smaller boats gently. "The job starts Monday," James said. "That gives you 3 days to rest and settle in. The kitchen's stocked with basics, and there's a grocery store 2 blocks down." "I can't repay," Robert started. "Stop." James held up his hand. "The salary's fair, standard for someone with your experience. Rent's normal employee rate. Everything else?" He gestured to the furniture. "Consider it an investment in our new safety training director." "Director? Well, we need an official title for the paperwork." James smiled. "Unless you preferred hero in residence, like Angela suggested." "Dad!" Angela blushed again. A knock at the door revealed 2 uniformed police officers, Officer Martinez and her partner. "Sorry to interrupt," Martinez said. "We heard Mr. Thompson was coming home today. Wanted to return something." She held out a plastic bag. Inside was Robert's old wallet, water damaged but intact. The photo of his daughter was still there, protected by its plastic sleeve. "Thank you." Robert held the wallet carefully. "I thought this was lost." "Not lost," Martinez smiled. "Just waiting like everything else." After the officers left, Sarah organized the groceries while James explained more about the job. Angela explored every corner of the apartment, offering decorating suggestions. "You need plants," she declared. "Mom says plants make a house a home." Speaking of home, Sarah checked her watch. "Someone has homework to finish." "But Mom—" "No buts. We'll come back tomorrow. Robert needs rest." The goodbyes took longer than expected. Angela hugged him 3 times. James left a folder of paperwork to review. Sarah promised to bring dinner later. Finally alone, Robert stood in the center of his apartment, and tried to process the change in his life. The bathroom mirror showed a different man than he remembered. 3 days of regular meals and care had already begun to erase the haunted look from his eyes. The new clothes helped too. He touched the mirror, half expecting the image to dissolve like a mirage. But it remained solid real. A splash of color caught his eye. On the small table by his bed, someone had left a framed photograph. It showed him and Angela in the hospital, both smiling despite their ordeal. The frame was decorated with seashells, obviously Angela's work. Next to it lay his Navy medals, rescued from his old wallet and carefully arranged. The sight of them no longer brought shame. Robert opened the window, letting the sea breeze fill his new home. The sound of rigging clanking against masts drifted up from the marina. Somewhere a seagull called. His phone buzzed, another new item provided by James for work. A text message appeared. "Don't forget to water the plant." Angela. He looked around, confused, then noticed a small potted succulent on the windowsill, a tiny American flag stuck in the soil. Robert laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. The rest of the day passed in a blur of small discoveries. The kitchen had coffee, real coffee, not the instant packets he'd been hoarding. The shower had hot water that didn't shut off after 2 minutes. The bed had clean sheets that smelled like fabric softener. Sarah returned with dinner, homemade lasagna and garlic bread. She didn't stay long, sensing his need for space to adjust. As evening fell, Robert sat by the window watching the marina lights come on. His legs still ached, but the pain felt distant, unimportant. His phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from James. Security code for the marina gate, 1234. Early morning swims approved for safety trainers. See you Monday. Robert smiled. James understood more than he let on. A final text came just before midnight. Good night, Mr. Robert. Don't forget to take your medicine. Angela. Mom said I could send one last message. He texted back carefully, still getting used to the phone. Good night, Angela. Thank you for the plan. Setting the phone down, Robert prepared for his first night in a real bed in 8 months. The sheets were soft, the pillow firm, the mattress supportive. But he couldn't sleep. Not because of discomfort, far from it. The bed was perfect. The room was perfect. Everything was perfect. It was the silence that kept him awake. No traffic noise from the bridge. No drunks stumbling past. No need to sleep with one eye open. Just peace. Robert got up and went to the window. The marina was quiet except for the gentle lap of waves against the boats. A quarter moon hung over the bay, painting a silver path across the water. In the distance, he could see the pier where everything had changed. The broken railing would be repaired by now, the crowd's gone home, the festival cleanup complete. But nothing would ever be the same. Robert touched the frame of Angela's photo, then his Navy medals. Tomorrow he would start figuring out how to be a person again, a neighbor, an employee, a member of society. For tonight, though, he simply stood at his window, watching his new world, and let himself feel something he'd almost forgotten: hope. The morning news van arrived before sunrise. Robert watched from his window as they set up cameras facing the marina, their lights cutting through the early morning fog. His phone buzzed. James, they're requesting an interview. Your call. No pressure either way. Robert looked at his reflection in the window. The new shirt Sarah had brought yesterday fit well. His hair was neatly combed. He looked normal. Okay, he texted back. The reporter was younger than he expected, her smile genuine as she shook his hand. Mr. Thompson, I'm Lisa Chun from Channel 7 News. Thank you for agreeing to speak with us. They set up near the water, boats rocking gently in the background. The camera operator gave a thumbs up. Rolling in 3, 2, 1. I'm here with Robert Thompson, the former Navy rescue swimmer who made headlines this week with a dramatic rescue at Tampa Bay Pier. Lisa turned to him. Mr. Thompson, walk us through what happened that day. Robert cleared his throat. Not much to tell. Girl fell in. Current was bad. I helped. You did more than help. Our viewers have seen the video. You risked your own life to save young Angela Williams. Anyone would have, but they didn't. And you were... Lisa hesitated. You were living under that same pier at the time? Robert met her eyes. No shame. Not anymore. Yes. 8 months homeless. Sober 8 months too. That's the important part. What gave you the courage to jump in? Wasn't courage. Was training? Robert gestured toward the water. 20 years in the Navy, you don't think. You see someone in trouble, you act. The interview continued, Lisa asking about his military service, his new job, his future plans. Robert kept his answers short, direct. One last question, Lisa said. What would you say to others who might be struggling like you were? Robert looked past the camera, toward the pier in the distance. Keep swimming. Current only wins if you stop. After the crew packed up, Lisa handed him her card. You're going to get more interview requests. Amazing story. Veteran hero. Second chances. People need to hear it. Not a hero, Robert said automatically. Tell that to Angela's parents. Or the millions who've watched you save her. More cars pulled into the marina parking lot. James had warned him this might happen. Other news stations following up on the story. Robert's phone buzzed again. Angela, you're on TV. Mom recorded it. Can we bring you breakfast? Before he could reply, a familiar voice called out. Robert? Robert Thompson? He turned. A woman in a naval uniform stood near the marina gate. Commander's insignia gleamed on her collar. Chief Thompson, she corrected herself, rendering a crisp salute. Commander Riley, Naval Station Mayport. Robert returned the salute automatically, muscle memory taking over. At ease, Chief. She smiled. You probably don't remember me. I was one of your rescue swim students, class of '09. Sorry, ma'am, Jennifer Riley. You failed me twice before I passed. Best instructor I ever had. The memory clicked. The cross-chest carry. You kept dropping the dummy until you made me practice it 50 times in one day. She laughed. Now I run the rescue swimmer program. When I saw the video, she pulled out a folder. We have an opening for a civilian instructor. Robert glanced at the folder, then at the marina where his new job waited. Thank you, ma'am, but I've got a position here. He gestured toward Williams Marine Services. Need to rebuild some things first. Commander Riley nodded. Understood. But the offer stands. You still got it, Chief. That rescue proved it. More reporters arrived. James appeared at Robert's elbow. Getting overwhelming? He asked quietly. A bit. Come on. Sarah's got breakfast waiting in our apartment. Press can wait. The Williams apartment was 2 floors up. Angela ran to hug him as soon as he entered. You're famous, she exclaimed. My whole class watched the interview. Not famous, Robert corrected. Just at my job. Former job, James said, passing him a coffee mug. Current job starts Monday. Assuming you still want it with all this attention. Want it more than ever. Robert sipped the coffee. Structure. Purpose. That's what I need. Sarah set plates of eggs and bacon on the table. Eat. You're still too thin. They ate together like a normal family having a normal breakfast. Outside, reporters waited. Phone calls needed answering. Life decisions loomed. But here in this moment, everything felt right. Dad, Angela asked between bites. Can Robert teach me to swim? Properly, I mean? James looked at Sarah, then at Robert. That's up to him, sweetheart. Once I'm certified as an instructor here, Robert said. Do it properly, with all safety protocols. Angela beamed. The fear from her near drowning seemed forgotten, replaced by determination. After breakfast, Robert checked his phone. 27 missed calls. Dozens of messages. One caught his eye, a Florida number he almost recognized. The message was short. Dad? It's Amanda. I saw the news. Can we talk? His hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the phone. 8 years of silence, broken by a viral video. Everything okay? Sarah noticed his expression. My daughter, he managed. She called. Understanding filled Sarah's face. Take all the time you need. Use our bedroom for privacy. Robert stared at the phone number. All the years of shame, of missing her graduations, her life. He pressed call. 1 ring. 2. 3. Dad. Her voice. Different, older, but still his little girl. Amanda. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. For everything. I know. She was crying. I saw what you did. That girl. You're sober? 8 months. Fighting hard. I'm proud of you. 3 words. So simple. So powerful. Robert sat heavily on Sarah's bed. Tell me about your life, he asked. If you want to. She did. College graduation. New job teaching elementary school. Boyfriend turned fiancé. All the things he'd missed. Can I come see you? She asked finally. Next weekend, maybe? Yes. No hesitation. Please. After the call ended, Robert sat quietly, processing. A knock at the door brought him back. Robert? Angela's voice. There's someone else here to see you. He opened the door. Angela stood with an elderly man in a naval uniform. Captain's bars. Robert recognized him instantly. Captain Morrison? Hello, Chief. His former commanding officer stepped forward. Saw you on the news. Still saving lives, I see. The day continued like that. Faces from his past appearing, reporters seeking comments, phone buzzing constantly. Through it all, the Williams family provided anchor and shelter. By evening, Robert was exhausted. He sat on his new couch, staring at Amanda's text message. She'd sent a photo, her with her fiancé, both smiling. A light knock. Angela entered carrying a covered plate. Mom sent dinner. She said you need to eat. Thanks, kiddo. She hesitated at the door. Robert, can I ask something? Sure. Are you happy? Really happy. Robert looked around his apartment. At the photo of him and Angela. At his medals. At his daughter's picture on his phone. Yeah, he said softly. I really am. Good. She hugged him quickly. Because you deserve it. After she left, Robert went to the window. The reporters were gone. The marina was quiet. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more attention, more choices. But for now, he watched the moon rise over Tampa Bay and let himself believe in second chances. The marina office smelled of coffee and salt air. Robert sat across from James, staring at the employment contract. Something wrong? James asked. Just. Robert gestured at the paper. Feels like too much. Full benefits, retirement plan, company vehicle, standard package for a director-level position. James leaned forward. Look, I've called around. Your reputation in the Navy was stellar. We're getting more business just from people hearing you'll be running our safety program. Robert picked up the pen, then set it down again. What if I can't handle it? Being homeless, it does things to your mind. Makes you doubt. That's why we start slow. James pushed a folder across the desk. First month, you observe our current procedures. Second month, you develop the training program. Third month, you start implementing. A knock interrupted them. Sarah entered with Angela. Sorry, she said. Someone insisted on seeing your new office. Angela ran to the window. You can see the whole marina from here. Robert smiled, then turned back to James. About the apartment. What about it? I want to pay full rent, not the employee rate. James studied him. Why? Need to stand on my own feet. Completely? Okay. James made a note. Full rate starts next month. This month's already paid. Robert nodded and picked up the pen. His signature was shaky, but legible. Welcome aboard officially. James stood to shake his hand. Want to see the training facility? They walked through the marina, Angela skipping ahead. Boats rocked gently in their slips. Workers called out greetings. The training facility was larger than Robert expected. A classroom with modern equipment. A pool for basic drills. Charts and safety equipment lined the walls. Pool needs work, James admitted. But with your experience, we could add rescue simulation features. Robert was already planning. Current generators, wave makers. Make it realistic. Already ordered. James grinned. Delivery next week. Angela examined the life jackets hanging on hooks. Will you teach classes here? That's the plan. Robert checked the equipment's condition. Basic water, safety first. Then specialized training for the crew. Can I take the basic class? Robert looked at Sarah, who nodded. First student, he said, once everything's set up properly. They toured the rest of the facility. Robert noted needed improvements already falling into his instructor mindset. The doubt was still there, but weaker. Back in the office, James had one more surprise. Coast Guard called. They want to contract our facility for some of their training. Specifically requested you as lead instructor. Robert sat heavily. That's a big responsibility. You can handle it. James's voice was firm. You've done it before. You'll do it again. The rest of the morning passed in paperwork and planning. At lunch, Sarah brought sandwiches. They ate as a family in the break room. Amanda called. Robert said quietly, she's coming this weekend. That's wonderful. Sarah touched his arm. Would you like to use our guest room? More space than your apartment. Thank you, but need to do this in my own place. Show her I'm really standing on my own. Angela looked up from her sandwich. Can I meet her? If she's comfortable with it. Robert smiled. She's a teacher, like your mom. Third grade, Sarah added. She mentioned it when we spoke. Robert blinked. You talked to her? She called asking about you. Wanted to make sure. Sarah hesitated. Wanted to make sure this was real. Robert finished. Not just a publicity stunt. Can't blame her for being careful, James said. But she's coming. That's what matters. After lunch, Robert met his new team. 15 employees, ranging from experienced boat handlers to fresh-faced deckhands. They gathered in the classroom, curious about their new director. I'm Robert Thompson. He stood before them, back straight. You've probably seen the news. Yes, I was homeless. Yes, I saved a girl from drowning. But that's not why I'm here. He pointed to his Navy credentials on the wall. I'm here because for 20 years, I trained people to save lives, to respect the water, to work as a team. That's what we're going to do here. A hand raised. Sir? We saw the rescue video. That current was brutal. How did you? Training. Robert cut in. Proper training means you act without thinking. That's what I'll teach you. The afternoon session went well. Robert assessed their current skills, noted areas for improvement. The doubts surfaced occasionally, but didn't overwhelm him. Evening found him on the pier, not his old spot, but the public area near the marina. The setting sun painted the water gold. Footsteps approached. James joined him at the railing. Having second thoughts? James asked. No. Robert watched a boat return to harbor. Just remembering the rescue, everything. Where I was, where I am now. He turned to James. Why did you really hire me? James was quiet for a moment. 3 years ago, we lost a worker. Training accident. I watched him go under. His hands gripped the railing. By the time help arrived, understanding dawned. That's why you want a safety program. When I saw you jump in after Angela, James shook his head. You didn't hesitate. Didn't wait for help. You knew exactly what to do. Training, Robert said again. No. James looked at him. Hard. You can train skills, but you can't train that kind of instinct. That's why I hired you. They watched the sun set in comfortable silence. Robert's phone buzzed. A text from Amanda. Booked my flight. Friday afternoon. Nervous, but excited. He showed the message to James. Scared? James asked. Terrified? Robert managed a smile. But good terrified, like jumping into rough water to save someone? Different stakes. Same feeling. They walked back to the marina. Sarah and Angela waited at the apartment with dinner. Movie night, Angela announced. Mom said you can join us. Robert started to decline, then stopped himself. This was normal. This was life. What are we watching? Later, after Angela had fallen asleep on the couch, Sarah brought coffee to the kitchen table. James told me about your conversation on the pier, she said. About why he hired you. Robert nodded. There's something else? She hesitated. The day you saved Angela, it was 3 years to the day since the accident. The coffee cup stopped halfway to Robert's mouth. I don't believe in coincidence, Sarah continued. Some things are meant to be. Robert thought about all the decisions that led him to that moment on the pier. All the chances for things to go differently. Thank you, he said finally. For everything. Thank you for my daughter's life. Sarah squeezed his hand. Now, about Amanda's visit. They planned logistics until late. Angela stirred once, mumbling something about swimming lessons. Walking back to his apartment, Robert felt the weight of the day. The contract, the responsibility, the trust people were placing in him. But it felt right. Like the weight of a rescue harness. Like purpose. His phone buzzed one last time. Commander Riley. Position still open when you're ready, Chief. But looks like you're right where you need to be. Robert smiled and texted back. Yes, ma'am. Finally found my tide. The apartment looked different with Amanda's suitcase by the door. Robert stood in the kitchen, watching his daughter arrange photos on his small table. This one's from my graduation, she said, placing a silver frame. Mom saved a program for you. Robert touched the frame gently. Amanda in her cap and gown, smiling at the camera. A moment he should have been there for. I'm so sorry, he started. Dad. She turned to face him. We're past that. Okay. You're here now. A knock at the door saved him from responding. Angela burst in, barely containing her excitement. Is it time for my first lesson? Mom said to ask if you're ready. Amanda looked between them, confused. Angela Williams, Robert explained. The girl from the pier. I'm teaching her proper swimming techniques today. Understanding crossed Amanda's face. The girl you saved. She knelt to Angela's level. I'm Amanda, Robert's daughter. You look like him around the eyes, Angela said seriously. Are you coming to watch the lesson? Amanda glanced at Robert. May I? The marina's training pool gleamed in the morning sun. Robert stood at the edge, now wearing an official Williams Marine Services instructor uniform. First rule, he said, addressing both girls. Respect the water. It's not your friend or your enemy. It's a force of nature. Angela nodded solemnly. She wore a new swimsuit, her hair tied back in practical braids. Second rule, Robert demonstrated the proper stance. Always check your surroundings. Know your exit points. Know where help is. The lesson proceeded methodically. Robert taught basic strokes, breathing techniques, safety procedures. Amanda watched from the side, occasionally taking photos. You're good at this, she said during a break. Teaching, at practice. Robert helped Angela adjust her goggles. 20 years of it. Ready to try floating again? He asked Angela. Yes, sir. She jumped back in, confidence growing with each exercise. Sarah and James joined them later, bringing lunch. They ate together by the pool, trading stories and laughs. Mr. Robert? Angela asked between bites. Can you tell us about when you were in the Navy? About the people you saved? Robert glanced at Amanda, who nodded encouragingly. Well, he began, my first rescue was in rough waters like when I found you. Young sailor went overboard during a storm. The afternoon passed with stories and more swimming lessons. Robert watched his past and present merge as his daughter and Angela took turns practicing safety drills. Later, back in his apartment, Amanda helped him hang more photos. The wall now showed a timeline. His Navy days, her childhood, the recent rescue, his new life. "I have something for you," she said, pulling a small box from her suitcase. "Been saving it." Inside was his old swimming medal from high school. He'd given it to her for safekeeping before everything fell apart. "Thought you might want it back," she said. "For your office." Robert held the medal, remembering the teenager who'd earned it. "Got a better idea?" They walked to the training facility. Angela was there with her parents, helping organize equipment. "Angela," Robert called, "come here a minute." He held out the medal. "This was my first swimming award. Won it when I was about your age. Think you could keep it safe for me?" Angela's eyes widened. "Really? Really? Remind you to respect the water. Train hard. Maybe win your own someday." She took the medal carefully, then hugged him fiercely. Amanda watched the exchange, wiping her eyes. "You've built something good here, Dad." That evening, they had dinner at the Williams apartment. Sarah had cooked Robert's favorite meal. Information secretly provided by Amanda. A toast. James raised his glass. "To new beginnings and second chances," Sarah added. "And swimming lessons." Angela chimed in. Robert looked around the table. His daughter, alive with stories about her teaching job. The Williams family, who'd given him more than just employment. Angela, proudly wearing his medal. After dinner, they walked to the pier. The sunset painted the sky in colors no artist could match. "I have news," Amanda said quietly. "Jake and we're expecting. You're going to be a grandfather." Robert gripped the railing, overwhelmed. "Girl or boy?" "Too early to tell." She smiled. "But the due date's in spring. Think you could visit then? Try and stop me?" They watched boats return to harbor. Angela remembered something. "Oh, your old Navy friends called the school. They're organizing a ceremony to reinstate your medals. Want to do it here at the marina?" Robert started to protest. "No arguments," James cut in. "Already approved it. Good publicity for the company. And Angela's class wants to attend," Sarah added. "They're doing a project on hometown heroes." "Not a hero," Robert said automatically. "Tell that to my daughter," James replied. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Robert stood at his office window, watching the marina come to life. His new ID badge felt heavy against his chest. A knock at the door. Commander Riley entered, followed by Captain Morrison. "Morning, Chief." Riley saluted. "Ready to certify your facility for Coast Guard training?" "Yes, ma'am." Robert returned the salute. "Equipment's ready. Staff's prepared." "Good man." Morrison looked around the office. "Like what you've done with the place." They spent the morning reviewing procedures, inspecting equipment, checking certifications. Robert moved through it confidently, pride replacing doubt. Angela appeared at lunch, eager to show off her new swimming skills. "Watch this." She demonstrated a perfect safety float. "Robert taught me." The commander nodded approvingly. "Good form. Maybe we'll see you at the academy someday." After the inspectors left, Robert sat in his office, processing the day. His phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Landed safely. "Miss you already. Christmas at your place." "Count on it," he replied. Another message arrived, this one from an unknown number. He opened it to find a video, the rescue, but from a different angle. Shot by someone on a boat. The caption read, "Never shared this before. Thought you should have it. Thank you for reminding us heroes still exist." Robert watched the footage. Saw himself dive in without hesitation. Saw the strength and training take over. Saw the moment he chose to risk everything for a stranger. A final text came through from James. "Coast Guard approved us. Full certification. Ready to start classes Monday." Robert looked at his reflection in the office window. The uniform fit perfectly now. His eyes were clear, focused. No more shadows of doubt. "Ready?" he texted back. Angela burst in, waving a paper. "Look, got an A on my essay. Wrote about you and the rescue and second chances." Robert hugged her, this girl who'd changed his life by falling into dangerous waters. "Proud of you, kiddo. Proud of you too, she whispered back. That night, Robert stood at his apartment window one last time. Tomorrow, they'd move him to a larger unit, closer to the training facility. New furniture would arrive. More photos would hang on walls. But tonight, he looked toward his old spot under the bridge. The place where he'd hit bottom. The place where he'd kept swimming. His phone held new pictures now. Amanda's sonogram. Angela's swimming certificate. The Coast Guard certification. His reinstatement ceremony invitation. Life had swept him into a new current. But this time, he was ready for it. This time, he had strength and purpose and family. Not just by blood, but by choice. Robert Thompson, once invisible under a bridge, now stood visible and proud. Not just surviving, but living. Not just existing, but maturing. The marina lights reflected off the water like stars. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new stories, new chances to make a difference. But tonight, he was simply grateful. For the rescue that had saved 2 lives, Angela's and his own. For the family that had grown around him. For the strength to keep swimming when the current was strongest. He was home.